Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Hi, and welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Carol Eddy, and I'm in Denver, Colorado. And I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Chris Gordon. Chris is an estate planning and elder law attorney who loves to help individuals and families of all kinds get their legacy organized. Chris often counsels clients in matters related to estate planning, elder law, asset protection, trust and estate administration, guardianships and conservatorships, probates, and business succession planning. And I'm sure he could name a few more. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Carol. It's nice to be here.
So let's jump right in. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into estate planning and elder law?
Absolutely. I am what we call in Colorado a recovering Californian, but I've been here long enough that I've had 5 children born here, so the Coloradans can't kick me out. I count as a Coloradan now. So I am the youngest of 6 children, and I'm a bit of a whoopsie. So that means that I had a pretty good vocabulary as a little guy. And I remember as a very little kid, people would say, you know, you would be a good attorney someday. And I don't know how to take that now looking back, but I think what they were trying to tell me is, for a 6-year-old, you're sure making some interesting arguments about why you should get what you want. So I've always kind of had law as a goal. But when I was a kid and a young adult and having those grandiose ideas, it was because I wanted to be a trial lawyer of the type that you see on TV. My mother didn't watch soap operas; she watched courtroom procedurals and law enforcement procedurals. So I always had that in mind, and I always loved in the movies when the lawyer gives the big impassioned closing argument, and that's what I'm going to do. And then as I studied law, and although I really enjoyed trial practice and evidence practice and things like that, I kind of came to realize that I don't have that maybe that competitive bug that I think you need to have to be successful in a more adversarial kind of interaction. I take that all very hard and very personally when I get involved in it. So it didn't take long for me to notice that I was much more comfortable in a counseling role. And so I don't litigate a great deal, but I do, every so often. And when I kind of started to notice that about myself, I did start gravitating towards this area of planning. And it always resonated with me. When I was young, 14, my father was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And we started to notice that he was struggling physically, but we also began to notice some interesting things going on mentally. He had some paranoia and some things that developed into more what you'd think of as just dementia. And he was only in his late 50s at the time, so it was a little young for that. And it took a while to get his diagnosis in. But at that age, I took note. I noticed that mom and dad had planned, and my dad and mom are that way. They plan things out. They're meticulous, and they're not preachy, but they're also not secretive. So we were all very aware they had plans made. And when dad passed away, I remember asking my mother, at some point, isn't there going to be some lawyer that comes over to our house and we sit around the table and he reads or something like that? And I still haven't done that yet. I haven't had any clients invite me over to their house to put a suit and tie on and read. So, I even then I kind of gathered that's not exactly how it goes, but that stuck. And when my first job opportunity after law school came up in the area of elder law, I felt very at home, and I've mostly stayed in that practice since then.
Well, that's great. And that's a super interesting story. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And then before we move forward, your mic is going in and out just a hair. I don't know if you're just slightly too far from your computer.
Well, I'm using my using my AirPod. Hopefully that'll be. No, I'll put the other one in, and maybe that'll help pick
I mean,
anything
it's
up.
only every once in a while. Most of the time it was fine. So I think we'll be okay.
Well, I'm sorry for that. I'll
No,
do my best
most of
here.
it was good. I think we can make it work. So if not,
Okay.
we'll do it
You
again.
can get back. Yeah, get back in touch, and I'll run you through my story again, and I'll keep my shirt handy. No big deal.
All right. Okay, I'll take a second so they can cut.
Absolutely.
So Chris, can you tell us what some of the most common issues you help clients with in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. For better or for worse, most of my client situations are fairly boring. I mean, from the standpoint of probably half of my caseload is helping families in some stage get their estate plan put together, or visits to keep it up to date. It's usually good to see them at least every couple of years to try to keep things up to date. Not everybody is diligent about that, but I do have a fair amount of time spent maintaining rather the plan. And then probably the other half is either, well, primarily would be implementation of the plan, I'm going to say, because someone has gotten older and they have some diminished mental faculties, or they've died and it's time to execute the plan. Tucked away in there is the occasional case where there isn't a plan or the plan is not working, and we need to deal with that. That would be more in the realm of what we call guardianship and conservatorship here in Colorado. And I do a
Sure.
little bit of that.
Yeah, and one of the things I was also wanting to ask you about is I'm sure you get questions about Medicaid and long-term care coverage for seniors. What do you think some of the most biggest misconceptions are about those two areas of planning?
That's a great question. These days, probably the bigger misconception that I see is that if they haven't done anything about it a long time ago, there's nothing really left to do to prepare for it. So a fair amount of my clients are referred to me from the financial advising community. And so many of them do have some plans in place. But if they don't, there's a lot of just resignation. Well, I guess I just hope I have to die at home and nothing will, I won't need anything beyond that. And sort of that resignation is probably the way to look at it. And so there's that misconception that they've missed their chance to do anything. Quite a few of my clients have been retired for a few years. And so they're not in the mindset of big changes in their financial picture. They probably could be, but they're not always wired that way when they come to see me.
Yeah, interestingly, when I was thinking about long-term care as a financial advisor, one of the misconceptions I have found is that people don't recognize, they only think they can get long-term care traditional insurance, which is an insurance that if you don't use it, you lose it, and it's expensive and the rates can go up. And they don't understand there are actually other options out there. You can do a hybrid life insurance policy to cover the same type of thing. And that way, if you don't use it, it's set up for you to use it if you need it. But if you don't, the death benefit goes to your heirs. So that way somebody benefits from the insurance policy. And
Exactly.
I just find that people haven't even heard about it.
They haven't heard about it, and they feel like that monthly premium long-term care insurance is something that maybe they should have gotten, but now they feel at age 70 something it's too late or it's not in their budget anymore. And therefore they must not have any other choice but to just hope to death that they don't need to spend any time in a nursing home.
Yeah. Yep, it's really interesting stuff. So what do you think the biggest challenges you see your clients face?
A good question. I mean, as I've been thinking about it, I have seen most of my clients struggle with balancing a couple of priorities. I think, almost anybody who comes to see me, they almost have the same prepared speech as their introduction to what they want to accomplish. Chris, we just want to make things really easy for our family, for ourselves and for our family. We want to make things really easy. And that's such a loaded term, making things easy, as you've seen, well, easy for whom and for what? And there's so many different things that come into place as age treats people so differently. Almost all people face some kind of diminished capacity in their age, but a lot of folks are able to stay in the driver's seat very competently until they check out, and so trying to hit that balance between, I want to make things easy so that my wishes can get carried out, so that the right people can have access to me, to my money, to my decisions, but also not so easy that there's abuse. And there's protections and contingencies in place. And so thinking through that balancing act is probably most of what I do, is helping people try to find the right level of contingency planning, I'll say, to put into their thought, where they're really solving enough problems that they can have some peace of mind, but they haven't created this quagmire that no one's going to be able to work with, or they haven't gotten so fatigued and frustrated that they just decide not to do planning right now. That doesn't happen very often. I've gotten pretty okay at helping people find their sweet spot, but that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, I think it's really important to figure out what their priorities are, because they think they have an idea. Often when you walk through it, it turns out to be a little bit different. And that feels like that's our job to kind of tease that out.
And I really do hate being the one to say, yeah, this idea that you have in your mind of how it's going to go, it is fraught with things that are not going to work. And I'm sorry. And I don't enjoy that. I mean, there's a reason why we call that being devil's advocate, right? But we do owe our clients a little bit of that. So finding a way to present that all delicately in a way that doesn't necessarily besmirch their children. I don't ever want them to think that, well, I think that your child's going to be the one that goes crazy and steals your money. I don't want to put them in that position of them feeling like they have to be defensive, but finding the right way to make them aware of certain
what could go wrong.
Yeah. But also being honest that it probably won't.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt to be prepared for it and kind of help them feel comfortable with that,
No, that makes a lot of sense. So can you give us an example of things going wrong with a client that came to you probably before they met you, hopefully?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, I was thinking of something, we talked a little bit about that, and I was kind of thinking, and I think the times where it's gone wrong is when people have come to me with bad advice, and it's oftentimes it's bad advice from somebody that they've known a lot longer than me. It might be somebody in the family. It's somebody's brother-in-law who lives in Texas, or it's you'll pardon me, but it might be their advisor in a different realm, but who knows a little bit about what I do, enough to be a little dangerous, and especially as it relates to Medicaid planning. We've talked a little bit about that, but we haven't really talked about it. I've always been trained that there are options, that it is acceptable and defensible and legally permissible to take steps to preserve assets so that they don't need to be lost before Medicaid eligibility can come into play. And there are people who have difficulty with that. There are people who feel that that's not fair or not appropriate, and it's tough. I do understand some of that hesitancy, but if I have solutions to present, it's difficult enough to help people understand how Medicaid works when they have an open mind. It's near impossible when their mind has already been somewhat darkened to that possibility.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting, important piece that you're saying is always call to find out if there's an option. Even there's people I say, oh, there's the 5-year look back rule, which is true, but
Absolutely.
maybe there's an exception to the rule that you could say, I know how I can fix this, or I can't fix this. You'll tell them one way or the other, but it never hurts to ask and find out, because it's a lot of stress to go on Medicaid.
It is. And the solutions that you might read about or might learn about, they're very difficult to know when they might apply in a specific family's case. And so it really does take some time and some education and some investment. And that is why there's a lot of estate attorneys who don't dip into elder law, at least into that aspect of elder law. It is complicated. It's not that complicated, but it's frankly not that enjoyable, especially when you have to deal with potentially dealing with the state Medicaid departments and the counties that supervise it. And those interactions can be can be challenging, and there's often not a lot of money in it at that moment. So it is tricky, but it's not rocket science. I mean, you can sit and you can learn it, and you can and you can implement it.
It's not rocket science for an attorney.
I would submit that
Really?
that my best resources in the Medicaid world that I've been in were when I've had very well trained paralegals who know the law and know the regulations, and also learn how the state views things, and what will help the state view things favorably. And that takes repetitions more than school,
Right,
it
but
really
they're
does.
also in the legal profession. I was just talking about outside the profession, it can get a little
Well,
complex.
fair enough.
That's why I love relying on people like you and your paralegals to answer those questions.
I'm trying to be humble, and you're trying to be nice. Thank you, though.
So can you tell us an example of a specific example of a client where things went right and it was really nice to watch the family deal with everything as it unfolded?
Carol, anytime we get to the point where I've gotten the phone call that someone has died, that one of my clients have died, and I know that they're well prepared, we get to get acquainted with their family. Their family gets to see how much effort and time and love that their deceased loved one put into being prepared and organized. And we get to the point after however many months it takes where we're ready to wrap it up. People are so happy, and it's so cathartic for them. I don't want to overstate it, but it really is. Like, if the easiest thing dealing with your deceased loved one is their legal work, it feels pretty good. Everyone does have that fear that, oh my gosh, this is going to be a slog. This probate's going to be the worst, and even if it's a simple probate, or if it's a trust administration, and they realize, oh my gosh, this was the easiest part, actually, it's very nice. And so it's very reassuring. I don't think I could highlight anyone specifically. There's just so many of these quiet examples that I don't tell my lawyer friends at lunch about, because they're just fine, average, everyday people who get through the process well. You don't want to be a story that I tell my wife about after work. Oh my God. And I met this family today, you would not believe. I don't nobody wants to be that family. So there's a ton that, I just met some nice people today. That's it. Got them through it. It was done. All right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So do you have any pieces of wisdom or in the years that you've worked with estate planning that for your clients, what would that be?
There's an expression that I've come to love where it says, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's out there. It's probably something that's on someone's meme somewhere. I don't even remember the source of it, but so many of these decisions about how to proceed, do I need a trust? Can I just use a will? Should I just leave things outright to my kids? Should I leave a little bit to charity? Yeah, the answer is yes, all of it, any of it. And it can be very challenging for folks to kind of agonize. They want to get it just right. I mean, so many people do just in a very straightforward manner. Oh yeah, my spouse gets everything, and if my spouse is already gone, my kids get everything, and that's fine. But even just in thinking through who's going to be in charge, who's going to be in first position to be the first personal representative, or who's going to have medical power of attorney for me, I see people wring their hands, and they're pulling their hair out, and it's like, guys, we just got to get something on paper. It'll be okay. It really will. And most families do okay. Most families have somebody in them, and you're wondering if they've managed to function as an adult the way that they act. But also, those families all have a lot of really decent people who will set their differences aside and try hard to do the right thing. So as much as I'm an attorney who's built to help people overthink, don't overthink, so yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's very good advice. So is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like our listeners to know?
No, I think that the nice thing in the community of estate planning and elder law attorneys is that, particularly when you're not dealing with complicated tax issues, there's a lot of really good people who do what I do. And I am often in the position of I'm being vetted by children who are looking for an attorney for their parent. Maybe their parents never had an attorney, never had a financial advisor, really has never had a professional advisor beyond a mechanic, And so you want to find somebody where you say, I like the way you talk to my mom. I like the way that you handle that with my dad. And a lot of us do that. And that's something that I try really hard to do, because a lot of times it's the children driving the ball. And so, daughter will ask me a question. I always want to turn right back to the parent and say, this is the answer to the question that your daughter had. This is how it's going to go. And you really want that, because our seniors need that autonomy and that respect. And even if they're having struggles, we can still give that to them in a way that helps them capture that ownership of their decision making that they need and they deserve, and that's proper. And so it's nice. And so many of my colleagues do that, and we certainly try to do that as well.
Well, I agree. I think the biggest thing is to give them a sense of control and let them control as much as they can. That's respecting them as parents. So
Yeah.
it's a delicate balance sometimes with the kids in the room, and asking good questions and having good intentions. That's really the bottom line. Everybody has good intentions, hopefully.
And that balancing act is so challenging. So
as we wrap up, can you tell us how people can contact you if they want to get more information?
Certainly. Do you want me to give out my phone number? I'm happy to do that. I don't know.
That's up to you.
Okay. No, I mean, look, Chris Gordon, Denver Elder Law. You'll find me pretty quick if you run that into Google. Our phone number here is a 303 phone number, and it's 337-2400. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. We have a website. I'm sure that it wouldn't be that hard to learn a little bit more about me if you needed to.
All right. And I'm sure we'll put it in the show notes too.
Thanks,
so thank you so much for your wise words and your great advice.
Thanks.
And for all of our listeners, this is the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Carol Eddy. And our guest today has been Chris Gordon. For more information about Chris and the work that he does, please visit stewartandgordon.com. And Chris, thanks again.
Thank you, Carol.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.